The city park looked calm under the soft afternoon light. Trees stood tall, and leaves moved gently with the breeze. People walked slowly on the paths, some talking quietly and others enjoying the silence. Near the far end of the park, an old man named Tom stood beside a wooden bench. His hair was gray, and his face showed lines shaped by time and memory. He held a small metal box close to his chest as if it meant more to him than anything else in the world. Tom came to the park often. He liked the quiet space and the familiar view. The park reminded him of days long gone. He would stand near the same bench, look around, and breathe deeply. To others, he looked like a lonely old man. To Tom, this place held stories that never left his heart. That afternoon, someone nearby noticed Tom standing still for a long time. The person did not understand what he was doing and felt unsure. A call was made, and soon police cars arrived near the park entrance. The sound of engines caught people's attention. Conversations stopped, and heads turned. 2 officers stepped out of one car. With them was a police dog named Rex. Rex was trained to follow commands and stay alert. His movements were controlled, and his eyes watched everything around him. The officers looked serious as they walked toward Tom. Tom noticed them coming. He did not move away. He had nothing to hide and nowhere else to go. He stood straight, holding his box, and waited. His eyes showed calm, not fear. The past had taught him patience. The officers stopped a short distance away. One of them spoke firmly, asking Tom what he was doing there. Tom answered politely. He said he was remembering old friends and needed a moment of peace. His voice was steady and quiet. The officers listened but remained cautious. They had been trained to be careful in every situation. One officer glanced at Rex and gave a signal for him to move closer. People nearby began to watch closely. The air felt tense, though nothing loud or sudden happened. Rex walked forward slowly. His steps were measured. He did not rush. His nose lifted slightly as he sensed the air. As Rex moved closer, Tom did not change his posture. He stood still, respecting the situation. The metal box in Tom's hands reflected a bit of sunlight. Inside it were memories, not objects of danger. But the officers could not know that yet. They only saw a man holding something tightly. Rex stopped a few steps away from Tom. He did not bark or pull forward. His ears shifted, and his body relaxed. He looked up at Tom's face and then down at the box. Something about the man felt familiar to him in a way he could not explain. The officer repeated his command, expecting Rex to continue forward. Rex remained where he was. His tail moved slowly from side to side. He took a step closer and sat down near Tom's feet. The crowd watching the scene grew quiet. People exchanged looks of confusion. This was not what they expected to see. The officers frowned slightly, surprised by Rex's behavior. Tom slowly bent down. He moved carefully, making sure his actions were clear and calm. He placed the metal box on the ground and opened it gently. Inside were medals, old and worn, and a faded photograph. The photo showed young men standing together, smiling, unaware of what life would bring them. Rex leaned forward and sniffed the box. He then looked at Tom again. Rex stayed seated, calm and steady, as if guarding him instead of treating him as a problem. Tom placed one hand on his knee and stayed still. His eyes softened as he looked at Rex. He remembered working alongside dogs long ago, trusting them with his safety. He felt no fear now, only a quiet connection. The officers noticed the items inside the box. Their expressions began to change. The tension eased slightly. They realized this moment was different from what they expected. Around them, the park felt silent again. The wind moved the leaves, and sunlight filtered through branches. People waited, sensing that something meaningful was unfolding. Tom closed the box slowly and held it once more. Rex stayed beside him, calm and loyal. The officers lowered their voices and spoke more gently now. The situation was no longer uncertain. In that quiet park, a simple moment had begun to shift everything. No one spoke loudly. No one rushed. Something deeper than rules and commands was present. And this was only the beginning. The park remained quiet after the officers noticed the box and the medals inside it. The people standing nearby felt that the moment had changed in a gentle way. Tom stood calmly while holding the box close again. His shoulders were relaxed, and his face showed no anger or fear. He only looked tired, like someone who had carried memories for a very long time. One officer cleared his throat and asked Tom about the medals. His voice was softer now. Tom nodded slowly and said they were from his service years ago. He explained that the park was a special place for him and his friends before they left for duty. He said they promised to meet there again someday, even if only in spirit. As Tom spoke, Rex stayed close to him. The dog did not move away. Rex sat beside Tom like a quiet guard. His eyes followed Tom's movements, and his ears stayed relaxed. The officers noticed how calm Rex was and did not interrupt. Tom explained that every year on the same day, he came to the park to remember his friends. He said the box carried more than metal and paper. It carried names, laughter, and moments that never faded from his heart. His voice remained steady, though his eyes showed deep emotion. People listening nearby felt drawn into his story. Some folded their arms and listened closely. Others lowered their heads in respect. The park no longer felt like a place of suspicion. It felt like a place of memory and truth. One officer asked why Tom stood there so long without moving. Tom replied that he was thinking about the promise they made. He said standing still helped him feel close to those he lost. He added that noise and rushing life often made memories harder to hear. Rex shifted slightly and leaned closer to Tom's leg. Tom gently placed his hand on Rex's head. The touch was slow and careful. Rex accepted it calmly. The bond between them felt natural, like two souls that understood duty and loyalty. The officers exchanged quiet looks. They began to understand why Rex reacted the way he did. Rex had been trained to sense emotion and intent. What he sensed in Tom was not danger but honesty and calm. One officer stepped back and gave Rex a gentle signal to stay. Rex obeyed but did not leave Tom's side. The officer then spoke to the people nearby and asked them to give space. The crowd respected the request and moved back slightly. Tom continued speaking. He shared how life changed after service. He spoke of long nights and silent mornings. He said memories sometimes felt louder than the world around him. Still, he never regretted serving or honoring his promise. The wind passed through the trees again. Leaves rustled softly. The park felt alive yet peaceful. Time seemed to slow, allowing everyone to take in the meaning of the moment. One officer apologized for the misunderstanding. He said they had to respond to calls but admitted that not every story was visible at first glance. Tom nodded and said he understood. He said everyone had a duty to do. Rex finally stood and stretched slightly. He remained near Tom but looked relaxed. His tail moved gently. The tension that once filled the space was gone. Tom looked around the park. He noticed the faces watching him. Some people smiled softly. Others looked thoughtful. He felt a sense of relief, not because he was questioned, but because his story was heard. The officer asked if Tom needed help getting home. Tom thanked him and said he would be fine. He said he planned to sit a little longer. The bench nearby looked inviting now. Tom sat down slowly. Rex sat near his feet without being asked. The officers allowed it for a moment. They watched the scene with quiet respect. Tom opened the box again and looked at the photo inside. He whispered names softly, though no one could hear them. His lips moved slowly as if each name carried weight. The park felt warmer now. The sunlight touched the ground gently. A child nearby asked his parent who Tom was. The parent answered quietly that he was someone remembering important people. Rex lifted his head and looked around, alert but calm. He seemed to understand that this was not a place for action but for presence. The officers prepared to leave. Before going, one of them thanked Tom for his service. Tom looked up and nodded. He said the thanks belonged to those in the photo. As the police cars moved away, the park returned to its normal rhythm. People walked again. Conversations resumed, but the feeling remained. Tom stayed seated, holding the box on his lap. Rex stayed beside him for a little longer before being called back. When Rex finally stood and walked away, he looked back once at Tom. Tom raised his hand slightly in farewell. He smiled softly. He felt lighter than when the day began. This meeting was unexpected, but it reminded everyone present that respect could be found in quiet moments. Sometimes, understanding did not come from force but from patience. And deep within the calm park, a simple story had grown stronger, ready to unfold even more. The park slowly returned to its usual pace after the police cars left. People walked again, birds moved between branches, and soft voices filled the air. Tom remained seated on the bench with the metal box resting on his lap. His hands were steady, and his breathing felt calm. The moment earlier had stirred memories, but it also brought peace. Tom looked around the park and noticed how much had changed over the years. New paths had been built, and young trees now stood where open ground once was. Still, the bench remained the same. It was old and worn, just like him. That made him smile quietly. He opened the box once more and looked at the photograph. The faces stared back at him with bright eyes and hopeful smiles. They were young then, full of plans and jokes. Tom remembered how they talked about life after service. Some wanted to travel, some wanted families, and some only wanted quiet days. Tom closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered their laughter, their courage, and their trust in each other. Those memories never faded. They stayed sharp and clear, even after many years. A man walking his dog slowed down nearby and noticed Tom. He saw the medals and nodded in respect. Tom nodded back. No words were needed. The silence carried meaning. Tom thought about Rex and the way the dog had reacted earlier. He believed animals sensed things people often missed. Rex had seen the truth without needing explanation. That thought warmed Tom's heart. As time passed, clouds moved slowly across the sky. The sunlight softened, and shadows grew longer. Tom knew evening was approaching, but he did not feel rushed. He rarely did when he was here. A young woman approached carefully and stopped a few steps away. She asked politely if she could sit nearby. Tom smiled and nodded. She sat on the other end of the bench, leaving space. She looked at the box and then at Tom. She said she had seen what happened earlier and felt moved by it. She thanked Tom for sharing his story without even knowing it. Tom listened quietly. He did not seek attention, but he appreciated kindness. Tom told her that remembering was important. He said stories lived only if someone carried them forward. The woman nodded and said she would remember this day. That made Tom feel that his presence mattered. The woman left after a short while. Tom remained seated. He felt tired but content. His thoughts drifted between the past and the present. He remembered the day he first came to this park after returning home. He felt lost then. The world felt louder and faster. The park became his place of balance. It helped him breathe. Tom thought about how people often judged by appearance or misunderstanding. He knew the officers did their duty. He felt no anger. The outcome proved that patience could change things. Nearby, children laughed as they played. Their joy felt honest and bright. Tom watched them for a moment. He hoped their lives would be peaceful and kind. The wind picked up slightly. Leaves fell gently onto the path. Tom brushed one off his sleeve. He felt connected to the world again, not apart from it. As evening approached, Tom stood slowly. His joints protested, but his spirit felt strong. He held the box firmly and took a deep breath. He looked once more at the bench and the spot where everything happened earlier. The memory would stay with him. It reminded him that respect still existed. Tom began walking toward the park exit. Each step felt steady. He did not rush. The path ahead felt clear. Behind him, the park continued its quiet life. The bench remained empty but meaningful. The air held a calm presence. Tom paused near the gate and looked back one last time. He whispered a soft goodbye to the place and to the memories it held. He stepped out onto the street and continued home. His heart felt lighter than it had in years. The story of that day would not be loud or dramatic. It would live quietly in those who witnessed it. It would remind them that understanding could appear in unexpected ways. And as the evening settled over the city, one simple truth remained clear. Honor could be recognized not by force, but by calm, patience, and quiet respect. Tom walked slowly through the streets as evening lights began to glow. The city felt calmer than before. Cars moved gently, and people passed by without hurry. Tom held the metal box close to his chest, feeling its familiar weight. Each step felt lighter than earlier in the day. When Tom reached his small home, he unlocked the door and stepped inside. The room was simple and clean. A small table stood near the window, and a chair rested beside it. The walls held a few old pictures, all carefully placed. Tom removed his jacket and sat down, letting the quiet surround him. He placed the metal box on the table and opened it once more. The metals reflected the soft light from the lamp. The photograph rested beneath them, edges worn but protected. Tom looked at the faces again. He smiled gently, feeling gratitude instead of sadness. Tom thought about the park and the people who had listened. He thought about the officers who changed their tone and the dog who trusted his instincts. He believed that moments like these mattered more than loud actions. They reminded people of shared humanity. Tom stood up and poured himself a glass of water. He drank slowly, feeling grounded. Outside the window, the city lights flickered like distant stars. He felt connected to the world again. The next morning arrived quietly. Sunlight entered through the window, warming the room. Tom woke early and prepared for the day. He placed the metal box back on the shelf where it belonged. He knew he would return to the park again someday. As Tom stepped outside, he noticed neighbors greeting him with smiles. Word had spread about the day before. Not through noise, but through quiet respect. Tom nodded kindly and continued his walk. At the park, the bench waited as always. Tom sat down and rested his hands on his knees. The air felt fresh. Birds moved freely above, and leaves danced gently in the breeze. People passed by and glanced at Tom. Some recognized him and offered respectful nods. Others simply enjoyed the calm presence of the park. Tom felt no need to explain himself anymore. Later that day, one of the officers from before approached the bench alone. He greeted Tom politely and thanked him again. He said the moment had reminded him why understanding mattered. Tom listened and smiled softly. The officer shared that Rex had been restless after leaving the park. He said the dog seemed affected by the encounter. Tom found comfort in that. He believed Rex understood loyalty deeply. They spoke briefly and then parted ways. There was no tension, only mutual respect. Tom remained seated, enjoying the stillness. As time passed, Tom realized that the story was not about him alone. It was about listening, patience, and trust. It was about seeing beyond the surface. The park became a place of reflection for others too. Some visitors slowed their steps. Some sat longer on benches. The space carried a new sense of calm. Tom continued his routine in the days that followed. He visited the park, fed birds, and greeted strangers kindly. His presence became familiar. People felt comfortable around him. The metal box remained a symbol, not of the past alone, but of values that lived on. Respect, duty, and quiet strength stayed alive through simple actions. One afternoon, Tom noticed a child placing flowers near the bench. The child smiled at Tom and said they were for heroes. Tom felt deeply touched. He thanked the child gently. Tom knew he would not always be there. Time moved forward for everyone. But he believed the message would remain. As the seasons changed, the park transformed with them. Leaves fell, snow arrived, and flowers returned. Through it all, the bench stayed. Tom's story lived quietly in the park. It lived in small gestures and moments of understanding. It did not need noise to be heard. And in the end, what changed everything was not a command or a reaction. It was recognition.